Hi guys, welcome back to Car Compulsion. You join me sitting in the John Cooper Works Clubman. I've had the car now for around 5 weeks and I've finally been presented with the opportunity to do a bit of a commute as part of my job to get some footage for the driving video. So I'm going to be talking today about what I've liked about the car, any niggles, what it's like to live with, is it fun, and just generally a good all-round overview of what it's like to drive. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and throw a like if you enjoy the content in this video, but let's get into the drive and let's talk about the car in more detail. So let's get into some details around the car and the specifics. This is a 2020, around an October 2020 build date John Cooper Works Clubman. Now, this particular Clubman or version of the Clubman changed in around 2019. The original car had significantly less power figures than this one. I think it was around 228 brake horsepower and around 350 Newton meters of torque. This particular car, however, has 306 brake horsepower, 450 Newton meters of torque, all driven through Mini's all-4 system, basically probably a rehashed BMW X-Drive system, and it will put down a 0 to 60 in 4.9 seconds. The engine is the all-familiar BMW 2-litre 4-cylinder engine that they're using in a few of the variant performance cars that they have on the market at the moment. It's featured in the GP3, the Mini GP3, and it's also featured in the M135i, which has almost or exactly identical headline figures to this John Cooper Works Clubman. The car is driven through an 8-speed automatic gearbox. Now, this was a point of controversy in a few different reviews, especially in the GP3 reviews. And look, let's get it straight out of the way and off, right off the bat. It isn't as, as quick, as snatchy, and maybe as potentially sporty as a dual clutch transmission that you'd find across the Vag group, or even the transmission, the dual clutch transmission that you'd find in my previous BMW M2. But it's not a poor transmission, and what it does do is it's really nice for livability on the day-to-day, whereas the M2, when pottering around, it wasn't the best, but when you were really hammering it was brilliant. And this is kind of the other way around, but when you're hammering it in this car and you're using the manual shifters or you're using it in its sporty modes, it's still quick, it's still responsive. It has the occasional meltdown where it kind of figures out where it needs to be, or a down change will be a little bit slow, but overall it's pretty damn good. Taking the car over into the manual box, responsive, lots of kick there, straight into 4th, into 5th, drop the car down, little bit of lag, but honestly nothing major. It's a decent little box for an automatic. Inside the car, it's very familiar Mini, coming from an F56 John Cooper Works hatch. Everything is kind of exactly the same, albeit it's a little bit more spacious, obviously, because Clubman. But it's a nice place to be. One of my critiques around my previous F56 hatch is that it was very creaky. The plastics seemed very brittle, and when it was cold, especially, it made lots of racket and squeaky, rattly noise. I can say right now that nothing can be further from the truth in this Clubman, so it leads me to believe, like a few of my commenters said on previous videos, that I might have got a Friday afternoon build car with the previous hatch. This particular car that I spec'd is equipped with the larger infotainment system. It has the Harman Kardon stereo as well, which I actually rate. It's not the best system that I've ever had, but I've had it in BMWs previously. It was in my M2. I've had it in a Mini previously, and it's a decent system. It's definitely an upgrade over the standard system. And all those things, the infotainment, it's got a wireless charging pad in the middle here, the Harman Kardon. It comes with a host of other things as well around sort of driver safety, lane departure assist and warnings. These new ones come with a digital dash as well. It's very nice, it's very crisp, not quite as customizable as some of the other ones that I've had, but all in all, the cabin is a brilliant place to be. Really nice, really comfortable, and feels very premium. They have scrimped a little bit on some of the cheaper plastics in areas, but you'd really have to look for them. The car has got a very familiar setup in regards to the driving modes that you find on the Mini platform. You have the mid mode, which is kind of your every day-to-day pottering around, doing the daily commute, you know, not really pushing on. Then you have the sport mode, which hardens everything up. Your steering gets firmer. There's more, you know, everything becomes stiffer. There's more throttle response, and actually a lot of augmented pumped-in sound comes through the cabin, but we'll cover that in a little bit more detail later. And then it has an economy mode, which, to be honest, it's that traditional BMW thing where it asks you to eke out, you know, coasting along to try and get up your saved mileage. It's not something I ever really use, but it's there for convenience if needed. So let's break down the things that I like to in my driving videos. Let's first start with, is the car fast? How does it feel? You know, is it quick? And straight off the bat, I can tell you right now that I called the F56 hatch quick because it was nippy. This is definitely on par with that 300 plus brake horsepower hot hatch standard that you would come to expect. It's a fast car. It's very torquey, and if I flip the car up into sports mode now and just keep in its sort of manual gearbox setting, you can probably hear that sound being pumped through the speakers. Now, it's not an unpleasant sound. It definitely is very over exaggerated, but for me, I'm kind of not really one of these ones that's that bothered about it. I'm not that much of a purist that I care about ripping it all out. It kind of adds to that experience for me, and really it makes me smile, so I'm really not that fussed. As just mentioned, the car delivers power across the rev range quite consistently. It's one of those sort of powertrains that's coupled with that transmission that gets you where you need to be very, very quickly, but with what I would consider to be little drama. Now, sometimes there isn't a huge amount of appeal in that for everybody, but it's very competent at what it does. It puts that 306 brake horsepower through that all-4 system almost flawlessly. The only time I've managed to get a little bit of slip off the wheels is when it was icy outside, but that's kind of to be expected in certain scenarios because it is a front-wheel drive bias-based, you know, all-4 system. But all in all, it does a brilliant job of putting that power down. It pulls from the lower rev ranges. It's quick, consistent. The kick down, when say on a motorway, is fast. It gives you the shove back in the back of your seat, and those full bore changes when you're changing with the manual paddles really hammer back and make a great noise, and it all adds part of the experience. So yes, it's very quick, very capable, a little bit less drama free, and I'd kind of compare it, I guess, to maybe an Audi S3, which does a brilliant job of everything but doesn't have a huge amount of drama. But I like that, and I don't need to be feeling like there's drama all the time. So I mentioned in the hatch review about steering and the general sometimes odd BMW steering that these cars can have. This is no different. The steering is very nice to live with on a day-to-day. It's very, very responsive. When you're kind of pottering around, the power steering is very easy when it comes to parking. It's very, very, you know, soft, nimble, easy to use. When you flip the car up into sports mode, the steering becomes a lot more direct. It does still have that travel that BMW cars have, and it does take a little bit of getting used to. It's not quite point and aim as some other cars in the segment or other cars that I've owned, but it's nice. Ride quality is hugely improved over the hatch. This is going to be partly down to you know, the way that the suspension is set up, but it's going to come down to a lot around the fact that this car is much longer in length than the hatch. It feels much more planted. It sits much more nicely. Now, you know, it's still a John Cooper works, so it is bumpy. You know, it does jiggle you around a little bit, but it doesn't feel that unsettled. And it actually feels a little bit better than some of the other hot hatches that I've had when it comes to feeling quite planted. And where it really shines again, like Minis do, is in the handling. This car handles brilliantly. It really is an absolute dream to drive when you're on the corners. This is going to be down to a few different reasons. The car sits really nicely. There's very little body roll. It feels very controlled. The car has a diff at the front, coupled with that all-4 system. You can really plant it into a corner and it will literally stick. It pulls you round the corner, throws you out the other side. Really competent, no slip, no concern, very little understeer if any, and it throws you round. You can plant your foot when you're coming out the other side, It's absolutely blissful. Now, thanks to Mr. EU regulations, this car is, of course, you guessed it, fitted with the petrol particulate filter, if you will. And actually, from the outside, it doesn't sound too bad. They've done a good job on what they can with it, but it doesn't sound like the John Cooper works of old. You know, one thing I did notice is that the 2019 variant of this car still had a little bit of overrun, a little bit of pop and bang, a little bit of crackle. Now, I appreciate I need some more miles on this particular car before maybe I would see anything like that. But honestly, from what I've been reading up on, I don't think I'm going to see it at all. I was advised that later in 2020, BMW mapped out that pops and bangs, or mapped out those crackles, and actually the same on the M135i. It still does have a nice deep sporty tone. It still sounds good on the gear change. Coupled with the fake sound, it makes it a pleasurable, fun experience. But I do think that maybe a Remus, you know, GPF back exhaust might unlock a little bit more sound out of it. I'm not really that bothered that it doesn't pop and bang, if I'm honest. I'm not really all about that now. I'm a bit too old for all that stuff. The car is what I would consider to be the perfect daily driver. Now, one thing we need to cover is it's a little bit left field in regards to choice, right? You know, Mini consider their biggest competitor to be the AMG A35, and to be honest, okay, power figures, yeah, you know, I can kind of see that. I mean, two different cars in my opinion. Someone wrote in the comments on one of my previous videos that this car is like a soccer mum's car, or like a mum's car, mumsy car. And I suppose to a certain extent it is, but I've always been a bit of a sucker for an ugly duckling. Always a bit of a sucker for something that's a bit left field. I bought a couple of Cupras instead of a Golf R. I had the Civic Type R, which everybody said had been hit with a Halford stick. And to be honest, I like the fact that this is a left field choice. I like the fact that it doesn't get picked by many people. And I like the fact that you don't really see many of them on the road. In fact, I've only ever seen one of them. But I think it looks really, really smart. I think it looks good. And there's just something a little bit about, you know, being much faster than the majority of cars on the road in a car that looks like, you know, a little mini squished angry estate. Don't know, there's just some appeal in that for me. No, seats, very comfortable, nice and supple and soft. This is the Chester leather interior. It's an option from Mini. They do a lounge leather as well. I've been really quite impressed. Like most new seats, they were a little bit stiff when you first sat on them, but they've softened up nicely over the last sort of 800 or 900 miles. They're really quite supportive. They don't have the levels of grip that, you know, the old John Cooper work seats had in my hatch, because they don't have that Alcantara-y finish that really hugs you in, but you don't slip around. Per gallon, pretty simple really, pretty much the same as anything else in this 300 brake horsepower segment. They're all very much around the same. Very simply put, the car will is quite frugal, and it will absolutely give you a good return on an MPG if you are not pushing on. I've seen 39, almost 40 MPG on a 60 mile an hour run for about 40-45 minutes. When you switch it up into sport mode, you start playing around with the paddles, or you switch it across into that sporty automatic mode where it really hangs onto the gears and you absolutely cane it, it's going to drop down into the low 20s. So thank you guys for joining me on the driving review of my John Cooper Works Clubman. Really pleased with the car, like I said. You know, definitely growing on me a lot, and yeah, just generally all round very, very happy. Plenty more content to come on this particular car, and there's going to be some other cars featuring on the channel when safe to do so. I've got offers and things lined up, but it's just this pandemic is really, really difficult for filming, and getting out at the right times and abiding by everything going on is a challenge. But stay with the channel, stay involved. Please hit like, throw a comment what you thought of the video and what you think of the car, good or bad. As long as it's constructive, that's fine. And hit that subscribe button. We're soldiering on to 1,000 subs and we're making good progress. Thank you all for your support, and thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Take care.